Pokemon moves tend to have a lot of changes between generations, whether that be changes to base power, accuracy, power points, or secondary effects. However, in this video, I will not be addressing any of those changes at all, but rather the changes made to their distribution, specifically focused on buffs. I recently made this same video but for nerfs, which I recommend you check out. I will be using the same metric for calculating how the distribution of these moves changed, so if you've seen that video already, you can skip to this timestamp. If you haven't, or just want a refresher, here's how I'll be measuring how these moves' distributions changed. I will be looking at what percent of Pokemon can learn the move out of the total number of Pokemon in that game for every generation of games, excluding Let's Go, BDSP, and Legends, as these games had a very limited competitive scene, or no competitive scene at all, and using these moves in a competitive sense is the focus of this video. The numerator is the total number of distinct Pokemon move pools that can learn the move, and the denominator is the total number of Pokemon in the national dex from that generation of games. By distinct move pools, this means that if Arceus can learn the move, it counts as 1 instead of 18, since Arceus' move pool does not change between forms. If both forms of Indeedee can learn the move, this counts as 2, since Indeedee's move pool does change between forms. Whatever this number comes out to be, I will be referring to it as the move's distribution percentage, and it will be rounded to the nearest tenth. Technically, if I were doing this perfectly accurate, I would add all the Pokemon with additional move pools to the denominator, but that would take forever to count, and it wouldn't make much of a difference anyway, so I'm not doing that. Before getting into the real list, I'm going to do a speed round of the most notable moves that were previously signature moves that are now much more widespread. I don't feel that these are as interesting as the rest of the entries, but I did still want to include them, and will still show all their numbers for how their distributions changed. Keep in mind that these are not all moves that were signature moves at one point, just the ones with the biggest buffs, although there are probably still some that I missed. Starting off with Weather Ball, the former signature move of Cast Form in Gen 3 that was made learnable by level up and teaching by a lot more Pokemon. Sacred Sword, the former signature move of the Swords of Justice in Gen 5 that was made learnable through level up by a lot more Pokemon. Leaf Blade, the former signature move of Grovyle and Sceptile in Gen 3 that was made learnable by level up, breeding, and teaching by a lot more Pokemon. Muddy Water, the former signature move of Marshtomp and Swampert that was made learnable through level up, breeding, and teaching by a lot more Pokemon. Slack Off, the former signature move of the Slackoth line in Gen 3 that was made learnable by level up and breeding by a lot more Pokemon. And probably the most notable of them all, Splash, the former signature move of Magikarp in Gen 1, a move that was made learnable through level up and breeding by a lot more Pokemon. Onto the real entries, we first have the move Knockoff. This move was introduced as a level up move in Generation 3 and was a teachable move from Gens 4 through 7 and Gen 9. It is a 65 base power, 100% accurate, physical dark type move with the property that it increases in base power by 50% if the target is holding an item while also removing that item. Knockoff may be the single most buffed move in the game in all aspects. The changes made to a move's base power, accuracy, or secondary effect are not the focus of this video, but it's so impactful for Knockoff that I feel like it deserves a mention. Knockoff used to be 20 base power with no additional boost from removing an opponent's item, and was only given to 4.9% of the dex. Nowadays, Knockoff is a 65 base power move that receives a 50% boost when an opponent has an item, and is given to 30% of the dex. While Knockoff's distribution was mostly buffed overall, there are still a few notable Pokemon that lost access to Knockoff that were previously able to learn it, those being Landorus and Bisharp. Both of these Pokemon used to have access to Knockoff via Move Tutor in Gens 5, 6, and 7, and could learn the move via Transfer in Gen 8, but cannot learn it anymore in Scarlet and Violet. For the vast majority of the move's history though, Knockoff has been one of the most buffed moves in the entire game, not just in power, but in distribution. Next, we have the move Close Combat. This move was introduced as a level up and egg move in Generation 4, and is a teachable move in Gens 8 and 9. It is a 120 base power, 100% accurate, physical attacking fighting type move that lowers the user's defense and special defense by 1 stage after use. This move used to be almost entirely limited to fighting types, with a distribution of right around 4% in Gens 4 through 7. It really felt like a Pokemon was part of an exclusive club if it was able to learn this very powerful and consistent move. In Gens 8 and 9, where this move was made to be teachable, is where that really started to change. In Gen 8, it was distributed to 12% of the decks, and in Gen 9, it is even higher at 15%. These days, it feels like pretty much anything with arms gets this move, and even some Pokemon without arms can learn it, like Honedge, which is just a sword, and Barraskewda and Sharpedo, which are both aquatic creatures. I still feel like 15% isn't that high, but let me know in the comments if you feel that close combat is too accessible these days. Next, we have the move Earthquake. This move was introduced as a level up and teachable move in Generation 1, and has been a teachable move in every generation ever since. It is a 100 base power, 100% accurate, spread damage, physical attacking ground type move. In Generation 1, where this move was introduced, it had a distribution of 19% and received a slight distribution buff in Gen 2 at 23%. Gen 3 was its biggest distribution buff, where it increased to 33%, and it has stayed right around there for all remaining generations. The fact that it's ground type, one of the best offensive types in the game, 100 base power, 100% accurate, with no drawback, and distributed to about 1 in every 3 Pokemon is insane. It is still unable to hit flying types and levitators, has its damage halved in grassy terrain, and hits your ally in double battles, but considering the high points of this move, Earthquake is no doubt one of the best attacking moves of all time. Next, we have the move High Horsepower. This move was introduced as a level up and egg move in Generation 7, and was made to be teachable in Gens 8 and 9. This is another physical attacking ground type move, but with 95 base power and 95% accuracy. This move is mostly just a worse version of Earthquake in singles because it's weaker and less accurate, but it has a niche in doubles as it does single target damage so it doesn't hit your ally, and does not have its base power halved in grassy terrain. This move hasn't been around for as long as Earthquake, but in Gen 7 where it was introduced, it had a very limited distribution of 1%. At the time, it was pretty much entirely limited to horse Pokemon with some exceptions. Like Close Combat, High Horsepower was made teachable in Gens 8 and 9, where its distribution shot way up at 9% in Gen 8 and 13% in Gen 9. Nowadays, this move is great on teams with Rillaboom, as you can deal single target physical ground damage without having that damage cut in half from grassy terrain like it would be with Earthquake. Next, we have the move Acrobatics. This move was introduced as a level up and teachable move in Generation 5, and has been a teachable move in every generation ever since. It is a 55 base power, 100% accurate, physical attacking flying type move that doubles in base power if the user is not holding an item. It had a distribution of 10% in Gens 5 and 6, and received a slight buff in 7 and 8, but it wasn't until Gen 9 where it received its biggest buff at 20%. Physical flying moves are in very short supply, as it was made apparent in my The Best Pokemon That Don't Use Stab video, so it's great that Acrobatics, a decent physical flying move, is distributed to more Pokemon, even though a lot of the new Pokemon that can learn it aren't flying type, like Sneasler, Palafin, and Chien-Pao. We still need a better and more well-distributed physical flying type move that isn't completely tied to being a bird though, like Drillpeck and Brave Bird. Next, we have the move U-Turn. This move was introduced as a level up and teachable move in Generation 4, and has been a teachable move in every generation ever since. It is a 70 base power, 100% accurate, physical attacking bug type move that switches out the user after use. Now U-Turn's distribution didn't have any big buffs between generations, and it was probably the one with the most gradual changes to its distribution from when it was introduced to now. It went from 14% in Gen 4, 16% in Gen 5, 17% in Gen 6, 19% in Gen 7, 18% in Gen 8, and 22% in Gen 9. U-Turn is one of those moves that you definitely use more for the sake of its secondary effect, rather than for dealing damage. Bug is not a great offensive type at all, but that is not really a factor with U-Turn, since no type or ability is immune to Bug, so your damage will never be negated, allowing you to always be able to get that switch off, unless your opponent protected or something like that. U-Turn is great for when you want to switch out, but also want to deal some chip damage, whether that be breaking a Focus Sash or knocking out a Pokemon that's already at low health. U-Turn is also good on slow Pokemon, as it allows you to switch out after your opponent has already attacked instead of before, giving you a much safer switch. It is great for single battles, as being able to pivot is very valuable, and is still often used in double battles too. So that's it for all the buffed entries, but when making this video, I found some moves that didn't have significant buffs in their distributions, because they kind of always had high distribution, so I definitely think that they deserve some kind of mention. So here is a bonus round of just some of the moves I found to always have high distribution, without being the obvious ones like Protect and Substitute. Thunderbolt has always had high distribution, being right around 30% for all generations. Dazzling Gleam has always had high distribution, and while it did receive a slight buff, it wasn't enough to be worthy of a mention in the real entries, since it has been right around 15% for most generations. And Stealth Rock has always had high distribution, being right around 20% for all generations. And those are just some of the moves with the biggest distribution buffs in Pokemon. Let me know in the comments which ones I missed. Anyway, if you want to support me and my channel, the best way to do so is just by leaving a nice comment. I do genuinely read all comments, and will try my best to respond to as many as I can. You can also click the join button to become a member, and I made the cost as low as possible at 99 cents USD. Members get a badge next to their name and early video access. Keep in mind that these videos will be releasing on my normal schedule for non-members, so please don't feel obligated at all to join unless you really want to support me and you are financially capable of doing so. Huge thanks to all my members. I really appreciate your continued support for the channel. Likes are also one of the ways that YouTube determines if a video should be passed around to more people, so if you feel that this video deserves to be, I would appreciate it. Thanks for watching.